I have decided something. What have you decided? I have decided
that
When we're born, we have a mommy and daddy, right? And then when we grow up and get married, we have children of our own. And then our children grow up and get married and have children. And so on and so on. So it's very important and very fun also to have sex.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I don't get it. Oh, yes. I don't get it.
Hello. This is Miranda, and you're listening to Interesting Sex, a podcast about who, how, where, and why we fuck. I need to ask real quick if you could just subscribe and give a rating and a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast. It would be super greatly appreciated. So happy you're here. When you do those things, you're going to be entered to win a really fun vlogger that was made just for my show by Petus Maximus of Maximus Leatherworks. You can find him on Instagram. You can also find me on Instagram at Interesting Sex Podcast, or go to InterestingSexPodcast.com, where you can buy a vlogger or you can buy some other super fun stuff. Stoked that you guys are here. We have a pretty interesting episode today. I'm talking to this guy, Marshal. He's pretty intimidating, maybe one would say. He's more into psychological sex and the effect of the mind connection with people's sexuality, and that's what turns him on. So I'd have to say he seems like a pretty wild ride, but why don't you be the judge? Let's check it out. Let's open our ears, our hearts, and our holes and give a nice warm welcome to Marshal.
Hello?
Hi, is this Marshal?
It is.
Hey, Marshal, this is Miranda calling from Interesting Sex.
How you doing?
Good, how are you today? Thanks for talking to us.
Of course. I can't complain. Can't complain yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm having a good day. I'm excited to talk to you.
Nice. Thank you.
So you're really busy. Thanks for making some time for us. What is it that you do?
Like in my day job?
Yeah.
I run a marketing company and basically spend all day working over computers or meeting with clients to try to find out how to get their message out to people.
Cool. That's a very busy kind of business job you have there. How do you identify sexually?
You mean as like I'm straight?
Yes.
But I don't know. I'm not sure that I really buy into a lot of labels, but I think that some people would interpret a lot of things I'm into as being dominant. I think sexuality is so multidimensional that it's kind of hard to just apply one overall label to somebody.
What is your favorite kind of sex that you enjoy? If it's dominant, like what does that mean, or what's your favorite?
You see, that's a great question because I'm not sure there's a cookie cutter answer to that. I mean, there's things that I'm into or things that I'm not into. A lot of it depends, on my mood and what's going on, and most of all, the person I'm with and what kind of connection we have, and what's going on there. So it's not like you're having abstract sex with somebody. So I mean, for me, I'm most interested in, it's a bit of a cliche, but the mind is the sexiest organ. I enjoy power exchange. So I enjoy when a woman gets turned on by being called names in bed or other behavior that might conventionally be thought of as humiliating or degrading. But I mean, it comes from a psychological place. So I don't especially love beating a woman until there's bruises all over. I mean, a nice spanking or whatever can be fun. But for me, even there, the effect is more psychological than wow, I'm overpowering somebody. I mean, it's also because I'm 6'5", 215 pounds. I'm in decent shape. So I know I can overpower someone. That doesn't necessarily do anything for me. Whereas, the capturing someone's mind and exploring new and, perhaps forbidden or vulnerable for the person I'm with territory, that can be very exciting. And I like to push those kinds of dynamics, too. So some of the most exciting sexual encounters I've had have been with women that have wanted me to take them out of their comfort zone. And, that takes a lot of trust and connection as well, but can lead to really exciting experiences.
When do you think you first became aware of this part of your sexual enjoyment?
I know exactly when, because I remember I was I was 18. I was in college. This is sort of way back when the internet was kind of much more in its infancy. And I was talking to some woman, I think she was like 25 or so online. And I said, well, what are you into? She said, I'm into BDSM. And I'm like, well, I better look that up. And I went on to, I don't think there even was Google then. I opened my Alta Vista browser or whatever it was and typed that in. And I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. This kind of resonates. Now, there's nothing more useless than an 18-year-old dom. I wasn't really sort of bringing a lot to the table at that point. But I knew that idea of the intersection of power and sex was interesting to me on a primal level.
Did you have sex with her? Or did you just
God, no. I mean, I don't even know if we ever met.
Okay.
We were just chatting.
Okay, so when was the first time that you remember actually trying out some of the stuff that you watched or had seen?
I mean, pretty soon after that. I mean, it was college, so there was a lot of drunken hookups, and I'm like, oh, really? I can spank you, or you just let me slap your face? Like, that's awesome. I can call you this? Like, these are exciting. This is exciting territory. So it wasn't very long after that I started getting into it, but it's not like every sexual encounter included elements of domination and submission, but it was definitely a dimension to my sex life. And of course, it all happens as a matter of degree. I mean, I think that there's certain sort of lines, like, okay, well, if a guy spanks you, then that's sort of, that's more explicitly dominant, in the same way that if you kiss someone, that sort of goes beyond what flirting is. There's still an interplay of power and sex, or domination and submission to some extent, just even in the lead up to sex, even if it doesn't even involve that. As a man, if you're invading, quote unquote, her personal space, holding strong eye contact, or even just, leading someone to where you want to go, it's like a dial turning as opposed to a switch on and off.
Can you tell me one of your favorite sexual stories that you've had in a dominant story?
It definitely had some interesting adventures.
I want to know an interesting adventure. I want to know, like, what it actually looks like when you're in this role. Like, what do you end up calling this person, or what does she do submissively? Like, what does that look like to somebody who doesn't know this kind of relationship?
For sure. I mean, in terms of, like, what it might sound like verbally, I mean, I'll probe to see how somebody reacts to different things. So I might playfully call someone like a bad girl, or you need to be punished, and see what her reaction is to that. And then, we start getting sexual, and I might call her a lucky little slut. I'm fairly well endowed. Sometimes when a sexual encounter begins, there's sort of a little bit of a smile or excitement on the girl's face when she sort of sees that. Then I can call her a lucky little slut. And that often is what starts the dynamic. And then where it gets more exciting for me is where I have her call herself different things, like little slut or a whore. And it can get more and more extreme depending on her interests or whatever. But it's not about any particular word. It's not like, wow, girl calls herself a little cum bucket. That turns me on so much. What gets me off is the effect on her. Either, her pushing herself out of her comfort zone, or the complete obedience, or seeing the conflict's probably too strong a word, but seeing a couple different dynamics going on with her. Like, I really want this to continue. I've never called myself that before, but I'm willing to go along with the ride. That's very exciting to me.
So what's the difference between her pushing herself through these windows and you pushing her? Like, how does she know that?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, I think they both have to, because everything has to be consensual. So I'm not necessarily pushing anybody through any windows. I mean, I might, if somebody's my sexual partner, I might tell her what to do. She has the option of doing it or not doing it. But I like it when, she'll push herself out of her comfort zone to do something and let me guide her, especially since I'm pretty in tune with watching and being aware of how she's really responding to different things. So what really can be exciting to me is when I find something that maybe she didn't even know that she likes, or that she might be a little bit, the type of thing she wouldn't tell anybody that she likes. and to bring that out into the open. And that can be really sexy and powerful.
Okay, so when you meet a girl and you can tell that it is going in this direction, that she's into that, can you, when you go out, if you're in that kind of mood, can you kind of tell who will be reactive to it before you ask them questions just by how they carry themselves, or you don't know at all?
You can't tell by like how somebody carries themselves. Sometimes I'll get an intuition, but usually I'll end up probing. I'll end up sort of doing little kinds of tests or something like that. Like if somebody says something that's a little bit bratty is perhaps the wrong word, but if we get into some kind of play fight, then I might playfully take her hand in mine and slap her on the wrist, but not hard. But the psychological effect is there. And if she's at all submissive and likes that kind of thing, I will get definitely a different look in her eyes, and her hand will respond differently than if she's not into that at all. So it's rare that I'll get something completely wrong like that, because usually I'm just in the flirting process anyway, testing and probing to see different things that she might like. And sometimes you end up, you do have an explicit conversation about like, oh, what are you into?
Okay, so when you are in these sexual encounters, you really do care about your partner's enjoyment in it?
Yes and no. Fundamentally, yes. But sometimes the dynamics that's most exciting is that I, quote, don't care, unquote. Now, in that case, the situation has to be negotiated beforehand. I'll tell you something that's maybe a little further out there. But there was this one woman that I hook up with once in a while that really enjoyed being humiliated and being put in her place. And one way that I hit upon that could push that dynamic really to an extreme was I had another woman there. And instead of, her getting to sleep in the bed with me, or in fact, like the two of us just being out on a date alone, she ended up being the third wheel. And I was paying most of my attention to this other woman who I put in a kind of a superior position to her. And the other woman was a little bit dismissive of her, a little bit, oh, that, that's so cute, you're trying to get his attention. And in the moment, she, quote, hated, unquote, everything that went on, but afterwards loved the fact that we did it and got part of the dynamic. She got herself off to it. Neither of us really touched her, but got herself off to the situation and the power exchange that was going on there. Especially since she was highly educated and the other woman that I brought in was kind of a little bit of a bimbo. So there was like a little bit of it's hard to intellectualize a lot of this stuff. But that fed on some kind of dynamic of like, okay, she's worked really hard her whole life to be educated, be a productive member of society, and she's giving herself to me, but she has to take sort of backseat to this kind of bimbo type and be nice to the bimbo who's kind of giggling at her. So that's an example of taking some of the psychological effects to an extreme.
When you're in a relationship with somebody, like even if it's not a exclusive relationship, but you're seeing somebody throughout a period of time, is it just during sex that you like to be dominant, or it's like is it always?
That's a good question. I think I'm naturally somewhat assertive, but I think outside of sex, I think I'm more of a typical male level of assertiveness, maybe a little bit more, but I don't live like a 24/7 power structure with somebody. I'm not really interested in that myself. In terms of a long-term relationship, I do like somebody that, has her own things to say. There's times where things cross over sort of from the bedroom, although, not all sex takes place in the bedroom, into the relationship and vice versa. But I don't think that if you were sort of just meeting me and somebody that I'm seeing like on the street, you'd be like, oh, wow, like she's really under his thumb kind of thing.
Right.
People often play a reverse role that they do in their regular life. So accomplished, professional, successful women often tend to be very submissive in the bedroom. And those are the types of women that I tend to date and spend more time with anyway. And so in those situations, that's part of what I value about them. Then it's also even more exciting to turn this woman that might have just been giving some presentation or just been performing in front of a crowd or whatever, and then she's, on her knees being my little whore an hour later.
Is there something that you feel that people should be punished for, or are there things that you ask women to do if you're angry at them?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, is there a lot of like punishment? Do you punish
Yeah.
people? How does that work?
So, I mean, that's a different sort of dynamic. Like, if I'm taking a girl out to a party or a bar or something like that, like, well, you have to be on your best behavior tonight. And I might have some rules or arbitrary rules and rules to, generally make her feel like more of a sexualized human being is probably the wrong word, because more of like a sexualized object, more like objectification. So, might be rules like you're not allowed to cross your legs. If she's wearing a short skirt or dress, you're not allowed to hike it down. I enjoy bimboification, like sometimes like dumbing down a girl in public. There was this one girl, and the rules were that go out to a bar like she wouldn't know anybody. And I'm a fairly social person, so I might start talking to people and introducing people to her and so on. And her rules were the only things that she's allowed to talk about were sex, clothes, beauty, and parties. And anything else, she had to giggle and say, I don't know, and look at me. By the end of that, she was super, super wet.
That must be really awkward for her.
It was, but I mean, she's playing a role.
Right.
It's like, it's power exchange. I don't think she'd like living like that 24/7.
Right.
I mean, look, I live in Los Angeles. I can get girls that are pretty much limited to that, whether I want them to be or not. It's not like the act itself that the girl's sort of kind of a dumb, ditzy slut. It's that she's being a dumb, ditzy slut for me or as part of something that we're doing together.
Right. What do you think makes you good at sex?
I didn't say I was good at sex.
What, like, well, I guess.
No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I wouldn't go around saying, like, I'm really good at sex.
Yeah, but I'd like to think, like, if you do something a lot that you enjoy, like, what is the best part that you live in it?
One measure that's often fairly good of, like, how good a sexual encounter was for somebody else was the intensity and number of their orgasms, but that, you have to calibrate to the person. I mean, some women orgasm at the drop of a hat, and then some and frequently, and for some it's less common. But that's often a sign of how powerful the experience was. And then, usually like how quickly she asks to see me again, or things like that. But what I think makes I think the strengths that I kind of bring to the table sexually is that I have a pretty good intuitive understanding of how a woman might be feeling in a certain moment, or places to lead her that she might either not know about, or more commonly doesn't want to make explicit, because that kind of spoils the fun. So if a woman's like, oh, I want you to overpower me, well, and gets overpowered, is she really being overpowered in that situation? I mean, can she really get into the fantasy of being overpowered in that situation? Or does she feel like it's only happening because she asked for it? I can pick up on a lot of cues and pick up on a lot of, well, if you like this and this, let's see if you also like that. So I think those all go into trying to make a quality sexual encounter.
What have you come across when it comes to limits in this type of relationship?
Well, limits are super important. So oftentimes if I'm starting to talk to somebody and it's really more or less a purely sexual or mostly sexual kind of conversation, like, I don't go to a lot of sex parties or stuff like that, but I've been to a few. Or, you're chatting with somebody online and it's pretty sexually oriented, then yeah, I will often ask what somebody's limits are. And there's your standard ones that are often sort of pretty gross and stuff I wouldn't want to get into anyway. And there's hard limits and soft limits. And soft limits are ones that can be pushed in the right situation. Hard limits are ones you stay away from. But if you start to get in too far out of somebody's comfort zone, not too far, but you start to sort of get out of somebody's comfort zone, things like safe words are also useful. So, like, I hooked up with somebody who was fairly new to being submissive, but liked a lot of the things that I was telling her. And she said, she wanted to try putting herself under my control, but she was scared of it. And I said, well, that's natural, and you'll probably even be scared while we're doing it. But this is, if you say the word red at any time, that will mean, hey, it's time to stop and figure out what's going on.
So someone like that is new into the relationship, did she tell you what soft limits were for her and or a hard limit, or she didn't even know at that point yet?
She told me some hard limits, but that doesn't necessarily mean that. And this is where I think some guys tend to make a mistake, is that anything that's not a hard limit you automatically have consent for, and that's not necessarily the case. So hard limits are you stay away from those, but there's still a lot of stuff that you can discover is a limit, or you can discover as a limit in the moment, and that doesn't even have to be out of necessarily like, wow, this particular activity is just crazy for me. I mean, maybe we've just been having sex for so long and it's starting to hurt or whatever. There's all kinds of reasons why you might want to stop. But stop, the conventional stuff like stop or no doesn't always work in that context. I'm not super into rape play, but a lot of women are, and that's fine. I'll indulge that. But, I've learned also that, remember once when a woman was like, no, stop, please. And I'm like, so I stopped. She's like, why did you stop? I'm like, because you said stop. So that's when I learned to make safe words, things that aren't stop or no, just in case that floats your boat, then I want to create space for that.
I want examples of soft limits that you've come across that you've been able to change into hard limits.
Well, you wouldn't want to change a soft limit. I mean, you mean soft limits that I've been able to push?
Yeah, give me examples of sex. I want sex examples.
Sure. Some of them might strike you as being gross or out there, whatever, but often a soft limit might be she doesn't want to have anal sex. That's a fun one to push because you can put it to a position where she really wants it by there's all kinds of little fun things you can do there. Like, every time you give her an orgasm, play with her butt a little bit or stick something up her ass, just stick a finger up her ass while she's orgasming. So she starts associating that. There are different ways of making her feel good. I told this one girl that, she doesn't want to be slapped in the face. And while I was on top of her, fucking her basically, and, I told her that I wanted to come in her, and that tends to be very exciting for a lot of women. And I wanted to come, but, there's something missing. I'm just like, what? I don't know, I don't know if I want to come unless I can slap your face. And then she sort of just keep, silence for a few seconds. And then she's like, you can slap my face. I'm like, no, you have to ask me nicely. And then, within a minute, she's like, please slap my face. And, that was really exciting for both of us.
Yeah. Do you often like to slap people in the face?
I like that one because that's just got powerful psychological associations with it. So I prefer that to a spanking, but I'll give a spanking too. But that's something I like a lot. And I can go, it goes further than that too. But yeah, definitely, I do like that. I like to make a girl slap her own face for me. That's really exciting.
Are girls often very willing to do that for you?
I mean, the average girl off the street, probably not. But the women that I tend to have sex with and build sexual chemistry with, and that enjoy the power exchange, yes.
What does your ideal relationship look like?
Well, and that's going to depend on the person and the dynamics. I mean, my last sort of super committed relationship was long distance, so there were elements of it that were kind of more open than they would probably be if we were in the same city. But I'm open to different sorts of dynamics. I'm not poly. I'm not going to have multiple emotional relationships. And I'm not going to be with somebody that does. But whether there's other people physically involved in the relationship and whether that happens, the rules under which that happens is all kind of negotiable and open to the dynamics of the person or of the relationship. And sometimes I've enjoyed sharing my girl with somebody else. Like, hey, I want you to suck this guy off. And that's still kind of being submissive to me because she's doing it on command and being objectified and so on, but also, in a way involves somebody else in the relationship. But there's all kinds of different gradations and ways that can go.
So if you were out with your girlfriend, you would pick up a guy and be like, I want you to suck his dick?
That's the kind of thing that maybe, that I've done a few times in my life.
Right.
So it's not like, we go out to a bar every night, let's hunt for a guy. But there are times organically in the right situation where It's like, yeah, I'm going to make you a little slut tonight. I'm going to make you suck off somebody tonight. Usually it's the kind of thing that I'll plan a little bit beforehand, but absolutely, that's a type of thing that could happen, but it's also not going to happen out of nowhere.
Right.
And that's also the type of thing that if that's a limit, it's not a limit that's super exciting for me to push.
Why don't you talk to me a little bit about aftercare?
Yes, that's often very important. Again, also depends on the girl, but that's where after whatever sexually going on is over, the simplest way to describe is that's when, as a guy, you change gears, and it can depend on the dynamics of the relationship and what the girl needs and so on. So it can be anything from just switching totally back to a kind of intimate, like, come here and I'll hold you and we'll talk about nonsense lying together in the bed kind of thing, and kind of resetting her that way, to you can also keep the power exchange dynamic if that's what you want, by being okay, now I'm done abusing you and fucking you hard and making you do all these things. Now we can lie here and you can rub my feet and we relax together. Aftercare can come in a bunch of different ways, but it's the idea being that, and this isn't unique to sex, but after a powerful emotional experience, which done right, a power exchange should often be, there's like a drop. It can be a very lonely feeling, even if there's people around. Probably the best way I could think of to describe it. But it's the same that like if you've gone to a really exciting event and you go camping for the weekend with some people or something like that, and it's really exciting and there's lots of stuff going on, but then at the end of it, like especially if it ends suddenly, then you're like, oh, you feel a little empty. And aftercare is sort of transition back into regular life. You slow things down. It's an opportunity to, for her to feel and process, and for you as the man to be there while she's processing everything, and whatever level of comfort that might, or whatever dynamic that she needs. I just want to give sort of the idea that aftercare is this cookie cutter thing, or that it always involves cuddles and flowers and roses. It can, but it doesn't have to. It can be something as simple as sitting out on the balcony or on the couch and having a glass of wine together. But the idea is, especially after a searing experience like that generally you don't, as the guy, just sort of up and leave. Though some women is quite like that and find that part of the fun too. So there was like this one girl who liked it when I would call her over, make her suck me off. I wouldn't even be paying attention to her while she was doing that. I'd be working on something on my computer, and then kick her out when she was done. And she thought that dynamic was kind of exciting. But I think if I had pushed her limits a lot in a situation, that was also well within her comfort zone by that point. So if I'd been pushing her limits and made it a super intense experience for her, as opposed to a fun and exciting one, that it might have had a different outcome.
And you wanted to keep that outcome because that sounds like a pretty good outcome for you.
Yeah,
that sounds like the ideal situation. Finding some girl that just wants to suck your dick and have to leave.
Yeah, I definitely didn't complain. I like sex a lot. I'm also super busy, so that kind of combined a couple of things.
Would you ever try being submissive, or have you ever tried it?
It wouldn't really do anything for me. As a girl ever like, oh, well, I should spank you for that. I'm like, whatever, lady. And I get slapped on the ass, and then I sort of give her a look. Yeah, sure. But am I organically in that moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm being punished? Like, no.
But maybe you've never really tried it to the extreme. Maybe you would like the extreme if you're put in it.
I suppose you could argue that about just about anything. And I think at a certain point, you get an idea of the types of things that you like. I don't really like Chinese food that much. So you might say, ooh, well, you might like Szechuan cuisine. And like, yeah, maybe I would, but I'm unlikely to.
Right.
But whereas like I love pizza, and you start telling me, well, there's this kind of thing that's like, it's like pizza on steroids, and there's like, it's all of, I don't know shit about cooking, so this is why this analogy is kind of breaking down. But I think you kind of get that, that's like, oh, well, that could be intriguing. There's not much about me that is like, wow, that's really interesting. Like, do I have to be in control all the time during sex? No, absolutely not. If I had, great sexual encounters where the woman's taken the lead, sure. Has there been times where I basically just lied on my back while a girl has ridden me and kind of done whatever she wants? Sure. But still kind of put that in the broad spectrum of vanilla sex. Yeah, when I was a teenager, at one point, I was experimenting and I tied my girlfriend up. This is like before we really knew what we were doing with any of this stuff, so it wouldn't really count as anything. And then like she would tie me up, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But like, did it turn me on in a special way? No.
Did you have any realization, like when you were a young child, that you liked to be in control of things? Or
No.
Did you notice a dynamic with your parents that anything was like that, or just something that came up later?
Definitely later. But a lot of women that I ask about, they're like into being submissive sexually, a lot of the times they do reference experiences like that. Even stuff that like is, be horribly politically incorrect, like more than one, more than two, probably more than 5 women that I've talked to about this have mentioned like, wow, I remember being little and seeing on the news like about some girl being abducted, and be like, wow, that's really exciting. That's interesting. And like, obviously this is processed through a child and so on. And nobody actually wants to be abducted, and all this stuff is horrible. But it's often with women that I talk to that they have some idea that they're into something a little bit different or a little bit powerful or dangerous men, or having consent taken away from them from a younger age, even if they're not able to identify that with sex.
You don't really enjoy rape play. It's more interesting for you to really have them not want it and then want it.
I'm not going to introduce rape play ever, just because it doesn't really do anything for me. But if I sense that that's something that that you as my sexual partner might be into, and that because that one's sort of obviously a tricky one with a lot of minefields, that's not usually one that I'm going to go to without any discussion beforehand.
Right.
I was dating somebody who, had been raped in her past, and of course a horrible experience for her and so on. But one thing that turned her on, I think because it was just such like a violation of it, would be that like while we were having sex that I would talk to her about her rape. Like that would make her feel like super degraded, and like in a way kind of a bunch of confusing emotions, and then come really hard. And like, yeah, some of this stuff got pretty twisted and hardcore. Like I'd make her say thank you to a rapist for, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I really shouldn't be saying a lot of this stuff, but hey,
that's intense. I've never heard of anything like that. I think it's surprising. I think that people don't really realize the psychological stuff that goes on really behind this, and people think it's just like some weird sex stuff, but it really is a lot of psychological work that happens inside your body, and people don't get that release sometimes or understand it. So it's good to talk about it.
For sure it is. And I mean, just to sort of flip all of that around, because I imagine that, one could very much have a judgmental reaction to that, and that's totally fine. But I guess somebody that's already been raped, I think it's kind of bad enough for them without society telling them how to process their rape. And if this is how she wants to process it, that's all power to her.
I agree. Thank you for helping her. So say you're in a relationship, or you're seeing somebody who's playing the submissive role, or is not playing, but maybe is the submissive role. What would you ask them to do to prove that they are submissive to you?
That's going to depend on her. So like if a girl's had guys call her a slut in bed for the last 15 years and it's no big deal to her, then, that'll be fun, but that doesn't sort of take that extra step that shows her submission to me. But, I guess an example like the story I was telling before of where, she asked me to please slap her face. That was a good example. So pushing your own limits or pushing yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone are things that, I find a good submissive dynamic. And then oftentimes it can be little subtle things like rubbing or kissing my feet. If I'm on a conference call and a girl lies sort of flat on the floor and starts like sucking on my big toe or something like that, that's a sexy, submissive kind of thing. It's going to depend on the dynamic and what kind of relationship we are and what she finds to be submissive, I suppose, because it doesn't necessarily matter as much what I think is submissive, because I'm more interested in the power exchange and what it's got to be something that she finds submissive and I find submissive. I mean, I know some women that like to, they're really into pain, and they don't think of themselves as being submissive at all. They just like the sensation of pain. And that's great. And to some guys, they might think that's a very submissive thing. And, I wouldn't think of it at all. But to some women, it is very much an act of submission to let a man hurt you. So it really depends on the dynamic. And so I don't think you can take that kind of stuff super and abstract.
Do you have a bucket list of sex things you'd like to do?
Not really. When I was younger, there were a few like, I'd like to try that. I've tried more or less everything that in the abstract I want to try, but then, I've often come up with individual things with somebody that I have an ongoing sexual relationship with. Be like, wow, I would really like to do this with you, but it would be something based on, some kind of reaction that she's had or some kind of conversation we've had or something about our dynamic. But no, I mean, it's, when I was younger, for sure. I mean, it's like, wow, I'd love to have a threesome. I'd love to have a foursome. I'd love to fuck a girl up the ass. I'd love to, I wonder what it's like to give a girl a golden shower. Like, all of those kinds of things. Yeah, I mean, I've thought about all that stuff.
I did that once, but right next to the pool. I let I let them pee on me, and then I jumped in the pool.
Yeah, well,
I was like, okay, you can do it right here.
I think generally that's how it goes. It's in or near a shower, and then a shower happens right after.
Right.
I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm not sure I really want to hang out with somebody that afterwards that smells of piss, even if it's my piss.
Right. One of my favorite things so far that I'm taking away from this conversation is the term that you've used a couple times called power exchange. I don't think it's something that I've really thought of very much in looking at these kind of relationships. And I think it's kind of a really cool term and shows like so many different levels of what it can look like, which is really cool. So thank you for sharing that with us, because that is kind of opening my eyes a little bit. It doesn't even have to be a BDSM relationship at all to have a power exchange relationship in it that creates a kind of a submissive and a dominant.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. You sound very attractive, Marshall.
That's very kind of you. Thank you.
It makes me wish we weren't on a phone call and at a coffee shop.
You don't sound so bad yourself.
Thank you. I'm not. Thank you, Marshall, so much for being here. It was really cool to get to talk to you, and I hope that you can come talk to us again sometime. Are you currently dating anybody?
Off and on, but nothing super serious.
Okay. Well, good luck to finding someone.
Thank you so much.
It's not easy. I heard LA's a hard town to date in.
Well, it's got its moments, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, if you have any good stories come up, please give us a call back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Did anyone else hear him say cum bucket? I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, getting degraded, getting called names, kind of interesting. Too intense? Not intense? Let me know. Follow us on Instagram at Interesting Sex Podcast. Leave me a message on my website, InterestingSexPodcast.com. Do you think you have interesting sex? Go to the website. We've got vloggers, we've got books, we've got all sorts of fun stuff. We've got bunches of episodes. We're so happy to have you involved and part of the conversation. We want to thank Marshall so much for being here. Guys, I want to remind us all that we are super lucky to be in a place where we can have sex with who and how we want. And just a reminder, not everybody is afforded that right in their life. So 10% of any profits that come from Interesting Sex Podcast are going to go help stop sex and human trafficking. Let's be grateful what we have, but let's put our hand out to help those who don't. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to the band 41 for this rad song. Go to 41music.net to check out more of their stuff. Thank you, everybody. I love you tons. See you next Tuesday to find out what the pussy drags in.
Yes, it's a dooby-doo. Well, it's a dooby-doo. Yes, it's a dooby-doo. I mean a dooby-doo-doo-doo.
Yeah! Yeah! Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I promise I will not judge any person.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.